This year's election marked the first time in modern history that both of Oklahoma's U.S. Senate seats were on the ballot at the same time. U.S. Senator Jim Inhofe easily won the GOP nomination in his bid to keep his seat for a fourth term. But the race for U.S. Senator Tom Coburn's seat was hotly contested, chiefly between two-term U.S. Representative James Lankford and former Oklahoma House Speaker T.W. Shannon. Turns out it wasn't close. Chris Castillo from the Oklahoman joins me now. And Chris, you were not expecting a runoff, were you?
I really wasn't. In the last, few weeks or so, I've kind of felt like Lankford could win this without a runoff. At least that he had a path to do it, with the strong base that he has in central Oklahoma, and then, of course, the network that he automatically has from all of his time at the Falls Creek Youth Camp. And he had a decent amount of money, and in the last couple weeks, he had momentum, I think, from Senator Tom Coburn, who they're running to replace, got involved kind of on his behalf without actually endorsing him, jumping to his defense about some of the negative ads that were run against him by outside groups that were involved in this race. I was not, however, expecting Lankford to get 57%. I was thinking it might be more in the range of 51, 52, somewhere in there if he could do this without a runoff, but it was a landslide. I mean, he just wound up crushing T.W. Shannon coming out of this 7-person field, not needing a runoff. And back in, Coburn first ran for the Senate seat in 2004 and faced some well-financed, well-known candidates and won without a runoff then with, 61% of the vote. So I don't know, it's pretty amazing that he got the margin that he did. And I think that ultimately, whether he was going to win or, I think Lankford really was the favorite from the beginning in this race. The question was obviously, whether it was going to go to a runoff. And I think what happened about, 6 weeks ago or so, when one of these dark money groups supporting T.W. Shannon's candidacy, dark money in that they don't disclose their donors, decided to go negative against Lankford, and that was a huge risk because of the possibility of a backlash against Shannon. Even though Shannon wasn't running the ads, his campaign wasn't running the ads, people were going to associate those ads with him. It's a big risk to go negative. They obviously felt like they had to do it because they must have had numbers that showed them behind. This is the only way to get in a runoff. Blah blah blah. Well, I think the backlash was evident. I mean, I think that it angered a lot of Republicans who kind of still go by the Ronald Reagan 11th commandment, not speaking ill of fellow Republicans. And then, as I said, it got Coburn involved, and a couple of weeks ago came out, defended Lankford against these ads and praised him with quotes that seemed ready-made for Lankford ads and mailers, which, and Lankford did take those quotes from Coburn and use them in the line. Coburn's just immensely popular back there. So
we're chatting with Chris Castillo. He's joining us tonight from the Oklahoman's Washington, D.C. Bureau. And Chris, I was going to ask you just that very question about Coburn. How big of an impact was that in this race?
I think it wound up being pretty big. The thing about Coburn, he's such a unique political figure. And, it's hard to talk about somebody replacing him. A lot of times, the way I word my stories is to succeed him. So I think what people really wanted was to think that they would get somebody, like Coburn, as close to Coburn as possible in that seat. You're never going to have another Tom Coburn. Like I said, just unique. But I think the fact that he got involved, that he stepped into it, he said from the beginning he wasn't going to endorse, was kind of critical of the outside groups and Sarah Palin and Ted Cruz, people who came in and got involved on Shannon's behalf and said that never works in Oklahoma. Apparently it didn't in this race, but I think that his involvement, him kind of enforcing what I just said about Republicans reacting negatively to the ads against Lankford, he kind of reinforced those feelings, and the things that he said about Lankford were just right there on the line of endorsing him. So I think it had an impact. I really do, probably pretty big, at least in this margin.
Chris Castillo joining us from Washington, D.C. Bureau tonight. So James Lankford wins this race. Let's talk about the 5th Congressional District race to replace Lankford's vacated seat.
Right. Yeah, that was a crowded field, too. This is the third time this seat has been open since 2006. Mary Fallon won it in a crowded field in 2006, and she, of course, ran for governor in 2010 and won. Lankford came out of nowhere to win this race against some financed state lawmakers and won the race. So here we've got the seat open again in 2014, another crowded field, some sitting legislators, some former legislators, and then you've got the Army War veteran Steve Russell, who was a state senator for a term, and Patrice Douglas, a state corporation commissioner from Edmond, heading for a runoff. Russell had a slight lead at the end, but neither of them got anywhere near 50% in that crowded field. So they're going to the August 26th runoff with Russell ahead. And Douglas was really well financed. I mean, she raised over $500,000. I think more than twice what Russell had, but still she finished second to him. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think you've got to kind of favor Russell at this point in this runoff, but anything could happen. It's all about turnout. It's going to be obviously a very small percentage of voters turn out for those runoffs, so it's just a matter of getting your people out.
Chris Castile is joining us tonight from Washington. I know it's a late night for you there, sir. We'll let you go. We appreciate your time, and your analysis is fantastic as always.
Glad to do it, Dave. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir. Chris Castile's coverage can be found in upcoming editions of the Oklahoman and, of course, online at newsok.com.